he can see that she is upset about it. Did you catch what he says right here? Thou cursest. Obviously, it was really, really important to her too, because she goes to look at it, or I don't know, maybe she was going to, at that point, take it and have it made into a graven image, and she opens the box or the bag or under her bed or whatever, where she kept these 1,100 pieces of silver, and when she goes back to find it and she finds it gone, she's really upset. Relationships. You cannot tell me in verse 2 that the mom and the son have a good relationship. You have a son stealing and deceiving mom, and then mom's reaction, the money back, I don't know, this floors me. Blessed be thou of the Lord, my son. Deceiver. Praise the Lord. I have a wonderful son. And deceive me all this time. Oh, she's trying to do it again. But then all this comes out. Well, the reason I cursed and the reason I upset is I was going to make a god out of this. And so together, the two of them decide, man, this is a messed up relationship. Seriously messed up relationship. You sit here and you say, where is the leadership of the child? Where is the fear and the honor of God among either of them? But then there says at the end of verse 2, blessed be thou of the Lord. All caps. What name of that, when you see all caps, is that to the nation of Israel? That's Jehovah, Yahweh, the sacred name. So she says, blessed be thou. Oh, Jehovah has brought you to me and blessed me so that you could steal from me and deceive me. And when he restored 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver unto whom? From my hand for my son to make a what? How messed up in your view of God do you have to be when you turn to your son and you say, blessed be thou, son of the great Jehovah. He has blessed me with you. And now the two of us together, we are so blessed of God that we're going to make another God? What kind of weirdo is going on here? This is definitely not a proper... Go to Isaiah chapter 46. Isaiah chapter 46. This is something that happened quite frequently in the history of Israel. And so starting in verse 10, God is going to deal with this again to Isaiah. And in verse 5 he says, to whom will ye liken me and make me equal and compare me that we may be like? Here's the problem that Micah and his mom have in making this graven image. They do not understand this passage of Isaiah 46. Who should you make me like unto? They lavish gold out of the bag and weigh silver in the balance and hire a goldsmith, and he maketh it a god. They fall down, yea, they worship. They bear him upon the shoulder, they carry him and set him in his place, and he standeth. From his place shall he not remove, yea, one shall cry unto him, yet he cannot answer, nor save him out of his trouble. Do you understand the folly that he's saying right here? You don't worship a God that you can take to a silversmith and somebody can make. You don't worship a God that you have to put him on your shoulder and carry him home and put him somewhere in your house. And you put him, but then later when trouble and tribulation arise and you cry to him, guess where he's going to be? Yeah, sitting wherever you put him in the house, because guess what? He can't get up and do anything about it. You never even hear him cry from the other room and answer you. That's what he's saying here. Why would you bow down and like me? Declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will do all my pleasure. Do you see the contrast? He says, you take something that was made by a goldsmith out of something that you valued compared to someone who was before all time and made everything. And then you're going to worship someone who can't move around, and yet God says, I don't have any form and void because I'm everywhere. And he says, you're going to worship a God that can't even answer you from the other room, but not only can I tell you things that are going to happen now and tell you things that happened before you, I can tell you things that are going to happen that are to come, and I can make it happen. And you're going to actually worship this graven image? Now go back to Judges chapter 17. In verse 5, we see not only do they have a substitute God, he's going to build himself a substitute church. And the man Micah had an house of gods, plural, and made an ephod and a teraphim and consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. And you see what he did? He built himself his own little church. He put his own little gods in there. And then he wants it to kind of look like it's supposed to look. And so the Jewish people were supposed to have a priest, and they were supposed to have an ephod and a teraphim. And so he makes his own. But he doesn't have a priest, and so he takes one of his sons and makes him a priest. In Judges 8:27, we have an instance of where the ephod, we don't have time to turn there this morning, we have an instance where the ephod becomes an idol. They're at war, and they're like, why don't we get the ephod and put it on? Because then God has to fight for us. You know, the nation of Israel did that with the ark several times. And one time they did that. They were losing badly, and the king said, run and get the ark and bring it out here in the middle of everything. And you know, some supernatural power is going to go out and kill everybody, or I don't know what he thought was going to happen. But they ran and they got the ark. They brought it out in the middle of the war, and they were losing so badly they had to retreat, and they didn't have time to pick up the ark. And the Philistines captured the ark and took it to the house of Dagon, where Dagon fell and started bowing to it. You see, the problem is, instead of worshiping the true God, they wanted to start worshiping these things that they picked and chose about God, and they just substituted church. And in verse 33, we saw there, but he takes his son and he makes him a priest. Exodus 29:9 is very specific about Aaron and his sons and how they were supposed to be consecrated. Every single priest was supposed to be from the Levitical line only. But this guy doesn't have a Levite yet. And so he makes it up himself. And now he's got this house of gods. He's got his church. He's got his little items, you know, that make it look like a church. And now he takes his son and he's got his own priest. And so it acts and looks and talks and functions like a church. Only there's nothing in it that honors God. Good on it. Because he also has a substitute religion. And one of the reasons I wanted to share this with you this morning is because this is a hugely popular thing today. Look at verse 13. Then said Micah, now know I that the Lord will do me good, seeing I have a Levite to my priest. Now, what from Bethlehem, Judah, who is actually a Levite, and he goes out to sojourn and find a place where he can stay, which isn't unusual. That's what the Levites were supposed to do. They didn't own their own land, so they were supposed to scatter through the nation of Israel, and they would come back to the temple and spend some time ministering, but most of the year they would live out among the folks, and they would be teaching them God's word. That's what they're supposed to do. The Levite shows up to Micah. Micah offers to pay him, take care of him, and make him the real, priest. And now this is exciting because his son doesn't have to be the priest. He's got a real live Levite. Well, it doesn't get any better than this. Now I got a house of gods. I got my fake gods built. I got my fake ephod. I got my fake teraphim. And now I got a real live, honest to goodness Levite priest. So in verse 13 he says, now I know that the Lord will do me good. In other words, what he's saying is, God has to do, and you get to fill in the blank, because I did fill in the blank. And I'm sorry, folks, but we got to be really, really careful, because there are so many religions today that are doing this thing right here. I can pull the little coin lever, and the wheels of heaven have to turn, and the little jackpot machine's going to kick something out and honor me. God has to do things, and not only did I work in the past, and not only do I work in the present, I will make happen whatsoever my will. On this Bible, I don't find anywhere obligated on my behalf. Religion equals prosperity. Now I have this house, now I have this gods, therefore I am going to be prosperous. God is really going to work. Now, the funny thing about this, and I guess the ironic thing about this, is we're going to flip over to chapter 18 and see because the shame of it is, we have people who have this great, and the exact same thing happens to them. They pull chapter 17, and then chapter shows up, and they're standing there wondering, here, well, let's just turn there. Go to Job chapter 1. Verses 9 through 11. Satan used this exact same, right? Satan answered the Lord and said, "Doth Job fear God for naught?" Same kind of language that we have here. "Hast thou not made a hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land." So, what's Satan going to God and saying? He's saying, well, yeah, health, wealth, and prosperity gospel works. Job does such and such, and you bless him. And because you've blessed him, and because he has his health, and because he has a large family, and because he's wealthy, he worships you. But I tell you right now, God, you take all that stuff away, there's no way in the world he's going to worship you. And yet Job does. Right? Turn with me, if you will, to John chapter 4. John chapter 4. John chapter 4, starting in verse 23 and 24. We looked at this also, but the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship in truth. This is the woman at the well that we looked at last week, and the problem of her skirt out from the fact that God has braced her with her sin. And God says, you have to come and worship me the way I say to be worshipped. Now, the interesting part of substitute God and a substitute church and a substitute religion is found in Judges chapter 18, the very next verse. And we're going to jump to the end in verse 26, and we're going to see this substitution of values, because the substitution of values leads to a distortion of character. So go down to the end of the chapter with me to verse 26. And the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back unto his house. Now, we're going to get here in just a minute, okay? But what happens is, somebody comes to visit his house, and they see his gods, and they see the Levite, and they go on their way, and then the children of Dan hear about it, and they're like, well, they're running around killing people and stealing everything. The children of Dan, these are supposed to be God's chosen people, acting like mercenary hoodlums. And they come to this guy's house and they steal his idol, and he says, wait a second, you can't steal my idol. And right now, I can't be responsible for what's going to happen. And the reason I wanted to jump down here to the end, because I want you to keep this in mind as we look at this erosion of character here in just a few minutes. Micah decides this isn't. I'm to you that there was another young man who was standing face to face with death, and he thought it was worth dying over, and his name was David. He goes down and he faces Goliath, and this big ugly comes out, he starts hollering and yelling. He starts making fun of God. You know, fighting the war wasn't his thing. He was just being obedient to death. Brothers, his responsibility for the Philistines. He put out that valley and started insulting things God over to the nation of Israel. Say that. Oh, that's not right. And you know the whole scenario. They try to dress him up in the king's armor. And can I suggest to you that David was a young man who developed this? You're not saying that about my. And in those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And they're just throwing a fit and acting up and carrying on because nobody's telling me what to do. And some instruction. There's no authority. But wait a minute. Isn't there authority? You say, well, there's no king in Israel, so there's no authority.